And welcome everybody to the Sports Corner on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair, your favorite Montclair Athletics baseball and football show. I'm back again. I'm your host, Sebastian Stratton, joined alongside my always amazing co-host, Mr. Nick Suppa. Nick, a lot to talk about and a very big congratulations to some Montclair State University athletes. But before we get into that, Nick, how are we doing today?
Always good, Sebastian. It's great to be here on this beautiful Thursday morning here on the Sports Corner.
It is a beautiful day. The weather's getting nicer. It is almost baseball season. Very excited for that. We are about 2 weeks into MLB Spring Training, and we are going to get into a lot of baseball talk today. But Nick, take it away. What went down in this beautiful Montclair State University basketball teams?
Well, there was certainly a lot of chaos as we witnessed, but in a good sense. So, for those who don't know, the Montclair State men's and women's basketball team have both won the NJAC championship last week, and not only that, have qualified for the D3 NCAA Tournament. And as we mentioned last week, this was the first time in 30 years that both the men's and the women's basketball team for Montclair State made it to the finals. But it has never ended where both teams have won at the same time until last week. It actually happened. We predicted correctly, Sebastian, and it came true. And now history has happened, and both the men's and women's basketball teams are in the NCAA D3 tournament and are NJAC champions of 2025. And for their first matchup, I'll kick it off with the women's, and then I'm going to pass the mic over to Sebastian for the men's. So the women's team won on Saturday, March 1st against TCNJ 72-63. They played TCNJ twice during the regular season, Montclair State coming out on top in the first game. And then the last game of the season, they played again here at Montclair State in Panzer Athletic Center, and the Red Hawks fell short. The 13-game winning streak came to an end, but not their championship run, as they went all the way. They passed William Patterson in the semifinals, knocked them out, and played TCNJ on the road in Ewing. And it was a fantastic performance. Olivia Vero, by far the star of the game, 24 points. She was 8 for 18 from the field, 8 for 11 from the free throw line, 2 assists and 2 blocks, and 10 rebounds. So a double-double game for her. Phenomenal, outstanding performance by Olivia Vero. And now they will be playing on... they will be playing tomorrow. They will be playing tomorrow, which is March 7th. They will be on the road again, playing Christopher Newport University at Washington, D.C., Franny Murray Court. And start time for that game will be 4:30 p.m. Now, that's what we have for the women's team. But, as I mentioned, we also have the information for the men's team. Sebastian, the greatest sports host of all time. Take it away, my friend.
I really appreciate that one, Nick. Very well said on the women's side. They will be traveling to the country's capital to take on, and I hope they win because it will be a very good matchup. They are a very well-rounded team. Now, on the men's side, they took on Ramapo College, who they lost twice earlier this season. Third time is, in fact, the charm. They defeated Ramapo in overtime, 91-85. An unbelievable matchup that didn't start off too well for Montclair. In the beginning, I was actually watching the live stream on my TV on the Red Hawk Sports Network, and they didn't start off too well. They were down at one point, 22-9. They weren't taking great shots. They weren't shooting the three-pointer well. And Coach Potts did what he always does. He called a timeout, regathered his troops. But I must say it again, when time is needed and a player has to step up big, mama, there goes that man. Jacob Morales, he was unbelievable. Nothing new from him. 28 points, 7 for 18 from the field, 50% from three-point range, and it wasn't just that. He was providing that extra element that we always talk about. 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 steals. He really is unbelievable. And now they will be in the NCAA Division III tournament as well as the women's, and they will actually be hosting a game right here on campus in the Panzer Athletic Center tomorrow at 6 p.m. versus Utica University. So that will be a very interesting matchup. And if they win, the second round matchup will be the day after, Saturday, March 8th, in the beautiful Panzer Athletic Center. So very, very exciting for the men's. And we always talk about how Jacob Morales and Mike Jackson, they're always going to do their things. But one guy, and I'm going to keep highlighting him over and over again, because he really is just so crucial to this Montclair Red Hawk team. And that's Kieran Flanagan. 38 minutes played, and as we know, Nick, you're a basketball guy. You know this as well as anyone. The stat sheet doesn't always tell the story. Only 12 points for Flanagan, but he really is a jack of all trades. 6 rebounds, 7 assists, and only 2 turnovers. That's one thing we talk about. When this Montclair team doesn't play well, they have 6 losses on the season. 4 out of those 6 losses were due to the fact that the opponent had 20-plus points off of turnovers. So we know that if Montclair is going to secure victory, especially tomorrow versus Utica University, they need to take care of the ball, they need to play with poise and precision, and utilize a multitude of players off the bench because Coach Potts has the ability to do so. So very, very exciting on Montclair State University athletic side. Good luck to both teams. We really do hope they play well, and we know they do because they are very good teams, and that's a credit to the job Coach Potts has done on the men's side and Coach Karen Harvey has done on the women's side. But now, Nick, we will shift our attention to Major League Baseball because as we get closer and closer and we inch to that opening day special feeling, I get excited just thinking about it. There is a lot to talk about and a very controversial story. No, it's not with the Yankees just yet. Nick, why don't you take this one away?
Well, obviously we've seen a lot of news in the MLB as the 2025 season as spring training is underway and the regular season is coming very soon. But we have found some pretty interesting controversial news, and guess what? I think you guys are definitely going to want to hear this. So MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred is considering removing Pete Rose, and for those who don't know Pete Rose, an absolute legend in Major League Baseball, the all-time hits leader, and he's all around one of the best players, best hitters. He's a World Series champion, and unfortunately last year he passed away at the age of 83, and now, a couple months later, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred is actually considering removing Pete Rose from MLB's ineligible list, which would reinstate him back into the conversation of potentially qualifying for the Hall of Fame. Now, for those of you who don't know, there was a controversial event that happened back in 1989 where while Pete Rose was managing the Cincinnati Reds, he got banned by Bart Giamatti, who was back then the commissioner for the Cincinnati Reds. He banned Pete Rose for betting on his team to win ball games. Rose, years down the line, appealed his case in 2015, so 10 years ago at this point. So, of course, he was still alive, and he was actually rejected by Rob Manfred. So he was rejected, and he still, after all those years later, he was never put in the Hall of Fame, despite putting up so many incredible stats and records. And now, unfortunately, as I mentioned, he did pass away back on September 30th of 2024 due to an unfortunate heart attack. And now, here we are, about 6 months later, and the discussion has just come out now, all these years later, that they might actually make him eligible to be on the list to potentially be in the Hall of Fame, which obviously I think is kind of sad that they're doing this right now after the guy died. I mean, what do you think, Sebastian?
No doubt. And I remember an interview where Pete Rose was interviewed. And first of all, this is all happening because Rob Manfred isn't the one who put this into effect. President Donald Trump, he was the one he actually wanted to reinstate. He was always a big fan of Pete Rose. But Pete Rose said it perfectly, and I said to myself, this is going to happen. When I pass away, then all these great things are going to happen. They're going to put me back in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose's kids are a fan of it, but here's the thing. Pete's not even going to be around to watch it. So it's very unfortunate. And you talk about these eye-popping stats and numbers. To put it into perspective, he had 15 seasons with a career batting average plus 300.
Wow.
For those who don't know how absolutely insane that is, the average batting average now in Major League Baseball is .240. So to put that in perspective, Giancarlo Stanton, who is, and we'll get to him in a little bit, we have a story about him, a potential future Hall of Famer with a career batting average around that 250, 260 mark, that goes to show you can fail 8 out of 10 times in just baseball. You can't do it in basketball. If you miss 8 out of 10 free throws, you're not making the Hall of Fame. Unless you are LeBron James, you can do whatever, be dominant, be the world's leading scorer. But in baseball, you can fail that much and be praised for your performance because baseball is a failing sport. You're meant to fail in baseball. So it really is unfortunate. And the thing is, not that betting is okay. It's definitely not, especially in his situation. He was managing his team. But he claims, and it was found true, that he never bet against his team that he was managing. It was always for his team to win. So, I mean, I guess that's a good thing, right? I mean, he wanted his team to win. He knew that his team could win because that Reds team was very, very dominant. So, Nick, I'll reiterate the question back to you. What do you think? I mean, this is a very unfortunate situation that they're doing it now, less than a year after Pete Rose passed away.
Well, I see from the MLB side of things why they did ban him for this. But again, if we all remember, he was managing. So this didn't have to do with like him as a player, and that's what the MLB Hall of Fame is for, what you've done as a player. And looking at his career highlights and awards, this will definitely tell you this guy definitely had numbers worthy enough to be in the Hall of Fame. He was a 17-time All-Star as a player. He won 3 World Championships, back-to-back in 1975 and 76, and then again 4 years later when he went to the Philadelphia Phillies in 1980. He was a National League MVP, a World Series MVP, the 1963 National League Rookie of the Year, a 2-time Gold Glove winner, Silver Slugger Award winner, Roberto Clemente Award winner, a 3-time National League batting champion, and has his number 14 retired in the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. Not to mention, still to this day holds 2 MLB records. One, as I mentioned earlier, the most career hits by any MLB player with a total of 4,256 hits. And this will go to show you how elite he is. Only 2 other MLB players have hit 4,000, achieved 4,000 or more hits. That's how elite that is. But no one has hit more than Pete Rose. And he's also played the most career games, more than any player, 3,562. So those are all his numbers that he achieved as a player, which goes to show you how incredible he was. And then it was just this unfortunate incident when he was a manager that caused him to get banned. And that's why I think, in my opinion at least, I think it's unfair that they did ban him. You might have different suggestions, Sebastian, but I think it is because it was something that he did as a manager, not as a player. So I don't think it would have any effect on that.
Unquestionably, and that just, I mean, we see it with Pete Rose. All of this, as you said, had to do with him as a manager. So it's not in a situation where Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds, 2 players who used steroids and were caught. So, and Alex Rodriguez, he has said that his number, he believes, should be retired by the Yankees, his number 13. And we've seen that after his career ended, that didn't happen. A multitude of players have used that number. Joey Gallo, who was horrible for the Yankees. And we know that Rodriguez wants that. But the question is, will Hal Steinbrenner do it? I think because Pete Rose, he was so great as a player, and this was one mistake he made in 1 year. He owned up to his mistake. He didn't put it aside and said, "Oh, what's the big deal? I'm just betting. I was betting on my team." He owned up to it. He understood that that was his mistake, and there's consequences to his actions. So I do think he should be reinstated to potentially be eligible for the Hall of Fame. But the thing is, does it even matter as much as it would if he were alive? Because 10 years passed between the time 2015 to 2025 when, as you mentioned, Rose applied for reinstatement. It was rejected by Rob Manfred, and now it's not that he's being pressured, but, I mean, I guess it is, right? Donald Trump's the one that's saying it. He has no control because the MLB is a private business, so in all, it's going to be up to Manfred, so it's going to be very interesting to see. Nonetheless, Pete Rose had a great career as both a player and a manager, someone that was well respected on all fronts, and really just someone that you could look up to because he was what baseball is all about. And shifting our attention to the man that we just mentioned earlier, Mr. Giancarlo Stanton. And Nick, we highlighted this last week on the show. He was dealing with tendonitis in both of his elbows. He hasn't swung a baseball bat since mid-January. What happens 2 days after our show? Manager Aaron Boone has stated that Giancarlo Stanton will not be ready for the regular season opening day versus the Brewers, and he will start the season on the injured list. And this is very, very unfortunate because in an offseason where you lose Juan Soto, you lose Alex Verdugo, who had his moments, Anthony Rizzo. I'm not saying they were the best performers because they weren't. They both had down years. But now you have a third bat, a third player from that regular season starting lineup in that playoff roster who is now not going to play. And Nick, this is someone that was going to be inserted as that number 4 batter. What did the Yankees do?
Well, obviously, this is a huge loss right now for the Yankees. You got your strongest batter by far in the lineup, and as we know, he has had a history of injuries in the past from his time with the Marlins and now with the Yankees. And now the question is, who is going to be the cleanup hitter for the Yankees? And I think that is where I think that's the transition that they're trying to figure out right now. I mean, there is a lot of questions of who will be able to take Giancarlo Stanton's spot as the cleanup hitter, and will they achieve greatness? So, I mean, we'll just have to see. There have been projected lineups from people for the Yankees lineup in 2025 as to who they think will be number 4. And right now, and I think there's been a lot of people saying this, people have been saying Paul Goldschmidt could potentially be in place of Giancarlo Stanton, who was one of their newest additions to the team. And obviously, Sebastian, we know Paul Goldschmidt is a phenomenal player, great hitter, but obviously after last year, it was one of his worst, if not his worst seasons as a player. So you question, will he be able to bring himself back to that elite player that he was? I mean, obviously when players are younger, things most likely for a player when they're younger, they achieve better numbers. But there are times when you get older, you become even better. Sometimes that just happens that way, and you don't know. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt did hit his first spring training home run with the Yankees, so now you question, is he going to get on a hot streak now? So you never know. But I think that's a pretty good move, and then have Jazz Chisholm starting off the lineup, and then go with your captain, Aaron Judge, and then one of your other newest acquirements, Cody Bellinger, followed by Paul Goldschmidt as the cleanup batter.
No doubt. I think there's definitely a plethora of ways the Yankees can arrange their lineup. But again, there's a lot of question marks. Not that, because we have players that have proven themselves. But now you really have to count on, just looking at that 5 through 9 in the lineup, Austin Wells has had his moments. Anthony Volpe, Ben Rice potentially, he can be a guy that can take that DH spot. But I think we are also going to see a little bit more of Trent Grisham, the super utility man who plays a lot of center field, a Gold Glove winner. And the reason I say that is I think that the outfield arrangement, not on opening day, is going to look a little bit more where it's probably Cody Bellinger in left or Dominguez. I think that it can rotate either way you put it. Trent Grisham in center because he's an unbelievable Gold Glover. He can run. He's like a cheetah out there. He just catches everything. And if he could hit, if he could hit consistently, he'd be one of the guys that would be in the lineup often, but that just hasn't happened. And then you move Cody Bellinger over to right. And then what then happens is Aaron Judge DHs and Paul Goldschmidt plays first. And just looking at the opening day lineup, I think it's going to be Ben Rice. He's a young kid, 26 years old, drafted 12th round in 2021. He's played less than a year in the MLB, and we all remember that moment. He hit 3 home runs against the Red Sox. Everybody thought he was the next Cody Bellinger, that stud, that slugger from the left side, that Hideki Matsui-like figure. And I'm not saying the home run got to him and he was struggling in a sense where he was thinking about it, but the stats don't show. He hit a $190 through that month of the season from June to September, and he really was struggling. He wasn't making great contact. So now there's a lot of pressure because we know the top of the lineup is going to play well. But the thing that worries me, Nick, and I'll ask you before we move on to Luis Eel, is Jazz Chisholm. He does have a little bit of swing and miss in his game. I loved him, and that's the reason Stanton, the injury hurt so much, is because I would have Chisholm sandwiched in between Stanton and Goldschmidt. You go Stanton 4, Goldschmidt 5, and then Chisholm 6 just to have that lefty spark, because we all know Stanton and Goldschmidt aren't stealing any bases. I mean, they're the ones that are going to drive in runs. They hit home runs. Chisholm can also hit home runs, but he can make plays in the infield. He's moving over to second base this year. He can steal bases, and that's that extra element we related to the basketball team. It applies to every sport, and in this case for baseball, your speedsters are Anthony Volpe and Jazz Chisholm. And I'll give credit Oswaldo Cabrera. Dominguez isn't more of a base stealer, but that's why if Oswaldo Cabrera ends up winning the job at third base, you insert him there. Now you do have the lineup, and it's a matter of holding down the fort, because Aaron Judge put it best. You're not going to replace Stanton, but you have to do something to fill that void, and that's what Aaron Boone and this Yankees front office is looking for. So it's going to be very interesting for sure. So now we will go right to the other side of the dugout and join the pitchers, Nick, because we're not going away from the Yankees just yet. Luis Eel, this is a very hurting injury as well. It just seems that there's a ball dropping on George Steinbrenner Field in Florida. Everybody's getting hurt. It was reported that Luis Eel will be shut down from all baseball activity for at least 6 weeks due to a high-grade lat strain. And we're talking about now, you only have 4 starters. Well, guess who jumps right back into the equation? Marcus Stroman. Nick, how do we feel about this situation?
It's really unfortunate because we've seen this story happen multiple times where a lot of Yankees players, whether it's hitters or pitchers, the injuries have just been one of their biggest weakness, and it's for them. I would say it's definitely frustrating because here you have Luis Eel, somebody who just won Rookie of the Year last year, did a heck of a job in his first year, and now his second full season in the big leagues hasn't even started yet, and he's already going to be shut down for now at least 6 weeks with this lat strain that he has. And it was pretty much certain that Marcus Stroman was not going to be on the Yankees going into this year, and they were trying to work out some moves to get rid of Stroman, actually, and nothing happened, so they kind of just stuck him on the had him sit in the corner for a while, and now all of a sudden you got one of your starting pitchers hurt. What do? Now that gives Marcus Stroman the opening job to be able to have that 5th starting pitcher job in that rotation. And for the Yankees, it's kind of a decline, I think, because Marcus Stroman last year, in the beginning, did pretty well, but at the end, we just didn't really hear much from him. And that was the story for him most of his career, even going back to when he was on the Mets. It wasn't really the greatest season or seasons for him, because things would start out great, and then towards the end, he would just kind of lose it. So, for the Yankees, it's good and bad. It's good that they now at least have an extra pitcher to fill that position for the fifth starting job, but it's, in my opinion, not the starting pitcher that you're looking for in place of somebody who was Rookie of the Year last year, like Luis Hill.
I will say this. I think it's less of a decline than the Giancarlo Stanton situation because you still have your top three. You have your Garrett Cole, Max Fried, and Carlos Rodon. Clark Schmidt is inserted as that fourth pitcher, and now Stroman. But as you said, you're basically jumping 10 miles per hour down. Luis Io, he would touch upwards of 100 miles per hour. Now, he didn't consistently sit there during the season, but this is a guy throwing in the upper 90s with a nasty slider/sweeper, good changeup. He had a 1-something ERA through most of the season, and then he had a difficult time controlling the zone with his walks. But now you have Marcus Stroman. I think as a fifth starter, he can be steady. He throws strikes. Again, he has to avoid the middle of the plate because when your fastball is averaging 88 miles per hour, you have big league hitters. They crush that. They are going to tee off on that. So it's a matter of Stroman. He doesn't have to be the ace. Hold down the fort. Do your job. And if you're the Yankees, this is kind of a show and tell. You want to put Stroman out there and potentially use him as leverage in the trade deadline because you might potentially trade him. He doesn't want to be a reliever. So when Luis Io gets back and he's healthy again, he jumps back down to that sixth starter role unless Clark Schmidt struggles. So very interesting there. And staying on the topic as a starter, before we go to break, Nick, the Los Angeles Dodgers, we talk about cap space. We talk about salary cap. Should there be salary cap? We just saw one of their moves in full effect. Roki Sasaki, the 23-year-old Japanese phenom, made his MLB Spring Training debut on Tuesday versus the Reds. I didn't watch the game in person, but getting ready for the show, I went on YouTube and looked up the highlights of the game. I actually didn't know he was pitching until he was on there, and I heard the announcer say, "Here comes the 23-year-old right-hander making his debut." Nick, he was unbelievable. He hit 101 miles per hour in March. He was dominant. 3 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 walk, and 5 strikeouts. And to put it into perspective, he threw 25 fastballs with an average velocity of 98 miles per hour, paired with a splitter and slider with tons of movement. And now I mentioned the Dodgers in general because they legitimately have 4 number 1 pitchers. And they have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Roki Sasaki, all players that were number 1 on a team somewhere. Yamamoto was a number 1 in Japan. Blake Snell was a number 1 with the Giants. Tyler Glasnow was a number 1 with the Rays. And now Roki Sasaki. Think about how crazy this is, Nick. Shohei Ohtani is expected to come back to the mound in May. You have someone throwing 102 miles per hour with a slider and a splitter like Roki Sasaki. He goes to your 5th starter. 5th starter, that's right, folks. So it just goes to show the dominance. I mean, Nick, what do we like about this Dodgers rotation in general?
You might as well give the Dodgers the World Series at this point. This Dodgers team is insane, especially from this pitching rotation. As you mentioned, now Shohei Ohtani is back in the lineup. Now Tyler Glasnow is back after being injured. Now they got Yamamoto, and now they got Roki Sasaki. They got fantastic pitchers, not to mention they just signed Blake Snell. They got a ton of pitchers in this rotation, and it's unbelievable. And Roki Sasaki, who is their newest addition to this rotation, for those who don't know, he was an absolute stud playing back in Japan. And as you said, Sebastian, he's only 23 years old, and this guy already has a 29-15 record back in Japan, threw over 500 strikeouts in his 3 years at Japan, and a 2.10 earned run average, 2.10. He also pitched a perfect game on April 10th, 2022. He's a 2-time All-Star. And not to mention, again, 23. He holds 2 world records for a Japanese player. 19 strikeouts in a single game and 13 consecutive strikeouts in a single game. These are numbers worthy of a Hall of Fame pitcher, and this kid is doing this at 23 years old. It's amazing. Not to mention he's a gold medal winner in the World Baseball Classic. So this guy's won awards. He's been in tough spots before. He knows how to pitch, and as you mentioned it, Sebastian, he's really put his pitching in effect already in just spring training, throwing an average velocity of 98 miles per hour, which is unbelievable. So this is definitely going to be an effective team, LA Dodgers team, not only in the National League, but in Major League Baseball.
I think the only question is health. If this team stays healthy and you have Tony Gonsolin, who I didn't mention, the question is, what do you do with him when he gets back? Tony Gonsolin, he's the 5th starter right now. You know what you do? You move him to the bullpen. Because you know who's also in the bullpen as a long reliever? Dustin May, who came back after a very interesting injury where he almost passed away because he got lettuce stuck in his throat and he had to get emergency surgery. So hope all is well there. But Dave Roberts, Dodgers manager, he said he's healthy and he's ready to go. So if one guy goes down, you just keep him moving. And if there's any question of, is there going to be a difficult transition from Japan to the MLB in terms of Sasaki's performance? I don't think so, because there's not that pressure where he has to be the number one. You have Yamamoto. You have the abundance of players that we just mentioned. So I think that when he gets into a groove performing in beautiful Los Angeles, California, it's going to be very scary. And I don't think there's anything really stopping this team. The Mets, maybe. Juan Soto, tons of acquisitions there. We'll get to that next week. So, very interesting. Nonetheless, we are going to take a quick break here on the Sports Corner. You are listening to everyone's favorite radio show on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere just yet. We are back here on the Sports Corner. I'm Sebastian Stratton, and Nick didn't go anywhere. Nick Suppa is still here. And now we turn the table to some NFL talk. And Nick, there have been a multitude of moves made, and I think it's only right if we start off with the one that occurred, I think a few hours after our show ended last week, and that is wide receiver Deebo Samuel, former San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Samuel, has been traded to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick. And Nick, this is a Washington team where they made it to the NFC Championship game. They have a very bright future. I love this move. Only a 5th-round pick, and now you add Samuel to that wide receiver room with already Terry McLaurin, a 1,000-yard receiver who just has glue on his hands. He catches everything. Jaden Daniels, the up-and-coming rookie quarterback. Not rookie. Last season he was. Second-year quarterback who had one of the greatest rookie seasons in NFL history for a quarterback. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and Zach Ertz. Now the one thing you think of, that O-line gets healthy. Maybe they add an option there at the guard position. Nick Allegretti currently there. Nick, I love this move, but there is one thing that scares me, and Deebo has to do this himself. It was reported by 49ers general manager John Lynch that Deebo Samuel came into camp last season and played most of the season 20 pounds overweight. That's right, 20 pounds overweight, and that showed. He looked slower on the field. He wasn't involved as often because now for the 49ers, I think this is a fair trade. The 49ers have weapons. They have Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings. They have their 3 receivers and George Kittle. They get a draft pick for it. And for the Commanders, you add another weapon to go with Terry McLaurin in this awesome Commanders offense. And in an RPO offense, not to mention, Samuel is a wide receiver, but he is also someone that can run the ball. We've seen him line up in the backfield and take carries at running back. We've also seen him return kicks, so he's kind of this Swiss Army knife that can do a little bit of everything. The main question, and Nick, I'll let you answer this. This Deebo Samuel has to lose weight. There's no going around it.
He definitely does, especially if you're playing in the NFL. You have to be in the best shape as you can, to especially as a wide receiver, in order to make those fast slants and move up and down the fields. Another thing, though, that the Washington Commanders also got to watch out for is that Deebo Samuel, and I'm sure you know as well, Sebastian, he has had a number of injuries down the line. Even going back to when he was playing in college, he had a number of injuries, including calf strains, hamstring sprains, and rib injuries. And this is going all the way back to 2015, when he suffered a hamstring injury right in the beginning in the season opener against North Carolina during college. And then when he came to the leagues, he was healthy for the most part. And then in 2024, he had a significant number of injuries. Back in September, he suffered a calf strain during a game against the Minnesota Vikings, and from there he missed a couple of weeks. And then about a month later in October, he also sprained or pulled a chest rib during a game where they played the Dallas Cowboys. And then, not to mention, that same month in October, he also caught pneumonia, so he also got sick, so he had to be treated for that. And then going back even further in the past, in February of 2024, before the offseason, he also sprained his left hamstring while running a route in the Super Bowl. He played through that injury, but again, that's 3 injuries that he had in 2024, so that's something that the Commanders definitely have to watch out for. And then on top of that as well, he's just got to make sure he's in the best tip-top shape that he could be if he wants to be at the top as one of the best wide receivers in the league.
Unquestionably, there's no doubt that the Commanders are taking a risk here, but you hope that Samuel does stay healthy, because when he does, as we said, he's a force. This is someone who in 2021, he had almost 1,500 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, and not to mention, he has over 1,000 rushing yards in his career. That's correct. A wide receiver who we talked about, that Swiss Army knife, over 1,000 rushing yards. He's someone you can put in the backfield just to take the attention off of Terry McLaurin, because we saw what Jaden Daniels could do with just McLaurin. I mean, we saw Olamide Zaccheaus, we saw other options, but they weren't that consistent wide receiver 2 that the Commanders need if they are going to take that next step and take down the Philadelphia Eagles. So I love this move. I think it's great. You pair him with that running back duo in Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz at tight end. I really like this move. It's a matter of, does he get in shape? I think he does. Everyone loves playing for Dan Quinn. Samuel has said himself, I want to play for Dan Quinn. He loves the culture under new ownership, and then offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury. They've really transformed this. It's kind of a revenge season. You want to get back at the Eagles, who you let up, I know it's not on the offensive side, 55 points in the conference championship. That's more than a lot, so I'm very curious to see how this goes. Very exciting season for the Commanders coming up. And now we go to a position that, Nick, is often undervalued, and we really haven't mentioned on the show. The big boys, the offensive line. I love this move. I don't know if I love it more than Deebo Samuel, but I think this is a very, very good move for the Chicago Bears, as they have acquired left guard Joe Thuney for a 5th-round pick from the Kansas City Chiefs. And I mention this because the Chicago Bears, they have a new head coach, and Ben Johnson, who is also the Lions' offensive coordinator. This is a guy in Joe Thuney who is one of the best left guards in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, which highlights all player stats no matter the position. He had an 82 pass blocking grade, which was 5th in the NFL for all guards out of 135 options. So he's a guy, Nick, you insert into that left guard spot, and you have DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, and Cole Kmet at tight end to go along with second-year quarterback Caleb Williams under this Ben Johnson offense that is really diverse. We saw with the Lions, he was commanding that Jared Goff-led offense with Jahmyr Gibbs and a plethora of options at wide receiver. I love this move. And in a division where you have a very competitive head coaches, and it's crazy to me to think that one of Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, Dan Campbell, or Ben Johnson is going to finish in last place this year. And I know we haven't seen Ben Johnson take the helm yet at head coach in a regular season game, but he's a very well-rounded offensive mind, and I think he's going to do his due diligence with Caleb Williams. But as we saw in the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes is 3-2, and I mention that because in his 2 losses, he was running for his life. He was a man gone wild. The offensive line wasn't there. There were a ton of injuries. We saw with the Eagles, they didn't blitz once the entire game and had 6 sacks, I believe. So your O-line has to be steady. I love this move in Joe Thuney. Nick, how are we feeling about this and then the Bears in general?
The Bears have definitely improved, that's for sure. I like this move, especially for them. We haven't seen much happen for the Chicago Bears, and I think a lot of people, except for any NFC North fans, except for Chicago Bear fans, I think that this is excellent for them. And as you mentioned, this was a big move, the Chiefs trading Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears. And then in exchange for this, I'm not sure if you had mentioned this, Sebastian, in exchange the Chiefs will reportedly get a 4th-round draft pick in 2026. And it was, for the Chiefs, they loved having Thuney on the team. But unfortunately, sometimes it gets to a point where the team can't afford to pay for everyone on the team, so that's when sometimes you just gotta cut people and say goodbye to even some of your best players, or your better players at least on the team. But for the Bears, this is an amazing move for them. And as you mentioned, they are going into the hands of a young rookie in Caleb Williams as their quarterback. They got great wide receivers like DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and then, of course, you got running back DeAndre Swift. So I think this is going to be a great Chicago Bears offense going into the 2025 NFL season.
I'm looking forward to it, definitely, and I think you put it well. The fans are tired. The Bears they never win. It's just unbelievable how they always get dominated. The joke about it is Aaron Rodgers being the Bears owner when he was with the Packers. So I like the moves that they're making. They actually got 2 linemen. Jonah Jackson, who will be inserted at right guard. He's a little bit more of a lesser name. Still good. I think he's going to start. But I love this move in Joe Thuney. The offensive lineman often isn't highlighted. And you know how you're good as an offensive lineman, Nick, is when your name isn't mentioned often during the game. When your name isn't called, that means you're doing your job, because when it is called, that usually means you gave up a sack, you got a holding penalty. So when you're doing your job, and in the Super Bowl, that Eagles O-line was unbelievable, top to bottom. We mentioned it with Howie Roseman. It starts with the O-line. I think we are going to see a lot of teams do that in the future, build how the Eagles built, and it starts with the big man up front. So very good move for the Chicago Bears. And we just mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Let's talk about his counterpart. Nick, I'll let you take this one away because we have a very interesting move that occurred in East Rutherford, New Jersey. MetLife Stadium, the New York Jets have released 32-year-old wide receiver Davante Adams after 2 seasons with the team, where he was underwhelming, to say the least. He was underwhelming. The reason he came to New York, was because he was going to play with his friend Aaron Rodgers, and he had an underwhelming season. He didn't eclipse 1,000 yards. 7 touchdowns, though, we saw that. But this is a man, I like him as a pickup somewhere, because we've seen what he can do in 2020 with the Green Bay Packers. Almost 1,500 receiving yards, 18 touchdowns. He can be a great, and I don't want to say veteran, because I think he still has it in the toolbox. He can play well. Nick, where do we see a potential fit for Davante Adams? Because there are wide receiver needy teams out there.
There's definitely a lot of teams out there in need of receivers. One in particular, our Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm sure they'll definitely try to make some kind of contract offer to Davante Adams after his release with the Jets. And because he's not actually with the Jets anymore and he's roaming by himself, I think it would be easier for at least for for teams who are in need of receivers to get Davante Adams, because now they don't have to try to make a counter offer with the New York Jets for something in exchange for him. Now they could just try to make an offer, sit down and talk with him, and try to make some kind of offer. But definitely, I got on my list as the number one team to be looking at him is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know that other teams like the New England Patriots have also been in need of wide receivers, and they've been talking to some of those top-notch receivers that are out there, like Chris Godwin, which we'll get to in a little bit, but he's one. So could they potentially go after Davante Adams? They could, because as I mentioned, they are another one of those teams who are in need of a receiver, and ever since the loss of Tom Brady when he went to the Tampa Bay Bucks and then eventually retired, and then Bill Belichick retiring after last year, after his long tenure with the New England Patriots, now he's gone and he's coaching in college. It's a rebuilding unit now for the New England Patriots. So will that be a great fit for them? I think it definitely will. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see where Davante Adams is going to want to be next season.
Nick, I think you read my mind, because we are talking about potential fits. It has to be the New England Patriots. This is a team under new head coach Mike Vrabel with over $100 million in cap space. Number one, they don't have a true wide receiver one. Not at all, actually. Demario Douglas was the only consistent, not really even a wide receiver one, more of a wide receiver two that showed consistency here and there. The main option for the Patriots was Hunter Henry at tight end. I think this is an awesome move. I think that the Patriots have to go out there and give DK Metcalf his money. And the Seahawks are requesting a first and third round pick. So that's very interesting, because I'm not sure how many teams want to give up their first round draft pick. I don't think many do. So I'm very curious there. But we talk about a big body option for Drake May. 6'4", 235 pounds. He's a big receiver who can go up and get it. Multiple seasons with 10-plus touchdowns. Multiple seasons with 1,000-plus receiving yards. I think that with the cap space, and you have him as your wide receiver one to help the young quarterback grow. A lot of quarterbacks are going into that year two season, and Drake May is one of them under new offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. I think he would be a great option just to have your receiver, because you have to have your go-to guy. It was Rob Gronkowski for Tom Brady. It's Travis Kelce for the Chiefs. And then for the Steelers, it was Antonio Brown for a lot of years with Ben Roethlisberger. So you have to have your go-to guy, which the Patriots do not have yet. So I think that DK Metcalf would be an awesome move, because he requested a trade and he has to go out there and get it. So he's going to have his options. He does have a no-trade clause, so we'll see if he declines it from anywhere. And our last story of the day, before we end here on the Sports Corner, is Chris Godwin, another wide receiver. Not someone that requested a trade, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have decided to not franchise tag a wide receiver, Chris Godwin, making him a free agent. And for those who don't know, the franchise tag is a designation that NFL teams may use to retain one player per offseason to be an unrestricted free agent and sign them to a contract for another year. This is someone, Chris Godwin, we know what he's capable of, but he also tore his ACL in Week 6 of the NFL season. He is recovering, and he is expected to be back for the start of the season. Nick, do you think this injury lingers on for Godwin, and can he be a potential fit somewhere? Because we saw with Tampa Bay, he was one of Baker Mayfield's top options.
Well, obviously, health is the main key in not just the NFL, but all professional sports. And as long as Chris Godwin is healthy, he could definitely be one of the best receivers in the league. Obviously, for those who know who Chris Godwin is, for those who don't know, he was a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl 55, and that was actually the first time Patrick Mahomes lost in the Super Bowl, one of those two times he lost. And he's been with the Bucs his whole career since he was a rookie back in 2017 being drafted. He's also a Pro Bowler, so he's been an effective piece of the puzzle for this Tampa Bay offense. And whether he will be coming back next year or he'll be in another uniform, like I said, as long as he doesn't get injured, and he stays healthy the whole time, I think it could be a great year for Chris Godwin. I think it could definitely be a comeback year for him, especially after this injury that he had. So I think this is going to be a fantastic upcoming season for Chris Godwin wherever he goes. It's just a matter of health, as I mentioned.
No doubt, and we talked about you need that guy that you can kind of go to third and long. Who's your go and get it guy? We've seen it. It was a duo, that dynamic duo in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that made a bunch of players. And only 500 receiving yards for Godwin this season, but that was because he was hurt. He tore that ACL in week 6, and this is someone who's had 4 seasons with 1,000+ receiving yards, 9 touchdowns in 2019. If he gets healthy, I have no doubt he can get back to form. Only 29 years old. So I'm very curious to see what Chris Godwin decides to do, because this is not a situation with DK Metcalf. He has a choice. DK Metcalf is going to get traded. Chris Godwin has a choice. So very interesting with all this NFL news in general. But that is going to do it here on The Sports Corner. I'm your host, Sebastian Stratton. Joined alongside me is Mr. Nick Suppa. We will be back same place, same time next week, 9 a.m. on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. Stay safe, have a great day, and we will see you next week.